Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 10, Episode 98. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being here this Monday, Steelers Nation. We are back on Monday, Wednesday, Friday for this week, draft week. Dave, how you doing?
I'm doing great. We might be Monday, Wednesday, Friday for a couple of weeks, at least a couple of weeks in a row here. Obviously, through the draft, we'll have a lot to talk about and break down. And we're running a little bit behind today, obviously, because we thought, we talked last week about Colbert and Tomlin. When are they going to do a pre-draft kind of media session? And thought maybe if such a thing was going to happen, it would happen on Friday. Well, they must listen to the podcast and change things up on purpose, because they had a Zoom media session. It's going on right now, finishing up. Doesn't sound like we missed too terribly much. I mean, obviously, I don't think Kevin Colbert's going to give away any picks during that thing, but we'll go over some of the main talking points to come out of that, and we'll be recapping all that on the site later today.
I was hoping there would be a gaffe and they would have a draft board behind Colbert or Tomlin, but I guess that didn't happen. I didn't see any plans there. So that's how we'll start off today's show. Right before that, we do want to mention one signing that became official. We had talked about this several weeks ago. It feels like now, with Jerron Jones being signed to the offseason roster, one of the several, I think, 8 XFL players that have been signed since the league folded. He was a former defensive lineman at Notre Dame, converted to offensive tackle sometime early in his NFL career. So it'll be some interesting project tackle depth for the offseason.
Yeah, he's the 9th total XFL player, former XFL player to be signed now. So 9 in total. We've obviously known about Jerron Jones, potentially or agreeing to terms several weeks ago. It's just it took this long to get it official, and now it is.
10 XFL players, you get a free haircut. I think that's how the league works. And I could use a haircut right now, so I hope they sign one. Anyway, all right, I'm going to shut up and stop being dumb. Let's talk about what Colbert and Tomlin had to say during their Zoom call today. Not a whole lot, to be honest. They talked about, this process, how it's, unique, obviously, but it's not unique to any one team. Every team has to deal with it. And they said, honestly, they might be able to learn some things from this year in terms of being more efficient and how to change their process slightly. They said they had talked to 37 FaceTime interviews to replace the top 30 visits that obviously could not happen with all facilities being closed. So trying to do their homework and try to maintain as much normalcy as possible in very unnormal times.
Yeah, at least we can at least we're getting word about how that process is working now. And the thing with that is we wondered how many of these virtual meetings they were going to be able to have. So it sounds like they were able to do more than their fair share, and actually more than 30. I don't know if maybe I wonder if how they did with the local kids. I wonder if those local kids counted, because obviously you can have 30 outside in a normal year. You can have 30 outside the area. Pre-draft visits come in and visit and all like that, and obviously the local kids do not count. But anyway, look, they're getting the process done, and we learned a few more names, I think, this past week of guys that they've Zoomed with. Who knew that would be a word? You're too old to remember. There was a show on the public. You'll have to Google this one. Public broadcasting system called Zoom. And kind of a kids show growing up.
Yeah, over my head on that one. Do you want to talk about who they FaceTime with, or do you want to talk about the rest of the presser? Or how do you want to go here?
Zoom is an American live-action children's entertainment series for ages 8 and up, created almost entirely by children. It originally aired on PBS from January 1999 to May 6, 2005. I didn't know it was.
And how are you aware of this? How are you aware of this, and I'm not, is what I want to
It was a remake of the 1972 TV series by the same name. Okay, so this was originally the 1972, stylized as a half-hour educational television program created almost entirely by children, which aired on PBS originally from January 1972 to 1978. That's how I know about it.
Okay.
It was originated and produced by WGBH TV in Boston, kind of inspired by shows like Sesame Street and The Electric Company and things like that. So there's your little education for you today. That's how I know.
All right. Do you want to talk about who they FaceTime with? You want to talk about the rest of the presser and then double back to who they've talked to?
Yeah. Why don't you go ahead and throw out some of those new names out there?
Yeah, I'll have to create, and I will create a master list of this right before the draft. The information is still coming in. I don't want to have the list and then have to update it and get some names. But we know two names, at least since the last time we talked. One is much larger than the other. We'll start with the latter. Sean Bradley, linebacker from Temple, relatively local kid, good athlete, ran in the 4.5s at the combine, and actually, I think, hit every box in what they look for study except for one. I believe he missed on the bench, remember off the top of my head correctly. So they talked to him several times, it feels like, according to what Bradley said. And then Jonathan Taylor, the running back from Wisconsin, of course, a big name here. He had a conference or a Zoom call with Mike Tomlin, who apparently had to go outside and walk around because he didn't have good connection in his house, which is a little concerning for draft day about Mike Tomlin's Ethernet connection. Please get yourself hard-lined in, Coach Tomlin. But yeah, obviously, Jonathan Taylor, a name we've talked about plenty on here. If he's there at 49, would be a very enticing selection for Pittsburgh.
Yeah, look, I mean, they're going to do their due diligence on all positions as they usually do, and sometimes, look, I know in the past when we've built these pre-draft visitor lists, those things are always good to go back to 4 years later, right? Mm-hmm. To show guys that they had interest in come free agency time. So, obviously they don't draft every player that they FaceTime with or meet with. They don't ultimately draft, and that's an obvious statement. But what I mean by that is sometimes they wind up drafting players that weren't brought in, or we'll see how that works out this time with the Zoom or FaceTime type meetings as well too. But however, in the way this year has gone, you would think that they would try to get more and more information, especially on the non-seniors, as they can via, any process that they can.
Yeah, and I think especially valuable for the undrafted guys. I think Kevin Colbert's, I would guess, and I think Colbert's basically said as much, is the biggest issue and the biggest change and difficulty of this draft is trying to deal with the undrafted pool. That's one reason why Colbert suggested a 10-round draft, which appears like that's not going to happen. Really didn't gain a whole lot of traction, but I think they have talked to some later round potential undrafted candidates to try to get to know those guys better. So when the draft ends and the craziness begins, they're a little more prepared for it. But yeah, we know their history of not only signing guys 4 years, 5 years later, that they looked at during the draft, brought in for visits, but also the history of guys that they've drafted that were part of the visits. Now, again, obviously no visits this year, Zoom call, all that stuff, but the history is pretty strong there, and those are guys that we have to keep in mind when it comes to doing our mock drafts and trying to figure out who they might take.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what else did they say during the conference? Tomlin said the virtual program will start April 27th. I know for some teams the virtual program started today. Not that that means a whole lot for our purposes, but that's going to take place of the offseason program. Speaking of running back, Kevin Colbert talked about James Conner. He says, quote, "I'm not going in thinking we don't have a starter-capable runner because James Conner is," although Mike Tomlin also said, quote, "If we get an opportunity that can add a back to our current pool, then we'll be excited about that. We have every intention to run the ball better in 2020 than we did in 2019, whether we add a back or not." So no commitments, obviously, really either way. I guess our thoughts would be relatively unchanged in terms of what they would do in terms of adding a running back, but there's their comments on the run game.
Yeah, I mean, Colbert's obviously not going to tip his hand either way, when it comes to comments ahead of the draft, and he's not going to come out and say, no, we're not going to draft a running back. I mean, obviously, that the potential of that happening exists. Obviously, probably a lot more so, in my opinion, than a quarterback or a tight end at this point. But man, he sure has seemed to have gone out of his way to reiterate that James Conner and his injuries last season were acute and that he expects him to start this season fully healthy, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Colbert said this line several times about Conner being a Pro Bowl back 2 years ago. I think that's a line he's repeated multiple times throughout this process. So
would you go out of your way? I mean, what is your take on? I mean, this isn't the first time. I mean, what he's saying today about James Conner and really Tomlin too is the same they've said, all offseason here. How do you will that have been a sign if they don't draft a running back this year? That we look back on and say, he defended, obviously, like I said, they're not going to pigeonhole themselves and say, no, we're not going to draft one. But why go out of your way to kind of talk about Connor this way?
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to go back and dot connect once we know what the answer ultimately is. If they don't draft the backs, then those will be statements we can go back to and say, yep, that's what, Colbert gave the game away in saying that. I mean, obviously, I think there's just a obvious amount of truth to it where they're confident in Connor when he's healthy. He's a really talented back. He can be the workhorse or three-down back. He's proven that when he's healthy, of course, is the big caveat. I don't have a great feel for what direction, how much to make of those comments. I think there's just so many levels of uncertainty this year, not to mention the fact that he's picking at 49 and, they're just waiting so long, no idea what the board's going to look like. So I think the philosophy, the thought would be if they don't get a running back early, if the guy isn't there, then they're comfortable with what they have. If there's an opportunity to maybe get a top-tier guy that we've talked about, then you could explore that if the value is that good and a guy that can maybe help you right away in a year where a lot of rookies won't be able to help you right away. So I just have a difficult time trying to gauge that statement.
It just to me, it's interesting that he goes out of his way to mention, Connor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, yeah. I mean, and nothing he said there is incorrect. And again, I think that they know what Connor can do when he's healthy, and I think they still have a lot of confidence in Benny Snell, and that's something that I think gets overlooked by a lot of fans and even by a lot of the media, to be honest with you.
Okay. With that, I mean, like we said about the running back position here, for quite a few weeks now is the fact that if they do draft one, I'd much rather them draft one of the top 4 or 5 early than wait. Now, obviously, you could still get some guys late, but to me, you're kind of defeating the purpose by going that route.
Yeah, and by the way, they're not trading for Leonard Fournette. I'm sure there's something in our email about Leonard Fournette that's not happening. So don't even entertain the idea, Seals Nation.
Yeah, I don't. Over $4 million in base salary cost in 2020. People say, why aren't you writing about trading for Leonard Fournette? Because we wouldn't be doing anybody, we'd be doing more of a disservice if we did such like. It'd just be wasted internet ink if we did that.
Yeah, we're not going to do that kind of clickbaity stuff. Yeah, I mean, Fournette, you're going to have to pay him soon. Just draft one with somebody with a little less mileage, someone that's cheaper, 4-year contract on a rookie deal. I'd rather do that than trading for Fournette, to be honest with you.
All right, let's see. Where else?
Not a whole lot else, really. They talked about Matt Canada and how he's going to be able to be brought in to obviously work with the quarterbacks and hopefully bring in some fresh ideas overall. I mean, pretty, boilerplate statement there. But I think, again, to circle back to that hiring when it happened, a good hiring and to have a dedicated coach to your quarterbacks, your young quarterbacks that are in such a just big moment in their career. Mason Rudolph, this is fight or flight for him year 3. And so to have a dedicated coach, I think it's going to be really valuable.
Yeah, we talked about kind of the things that help. Hopefully, he can help add to this offense. Right after he was hired and on. Pre-snap motion stuff, and he did a lot of interesting things. During his time as an offensive coordinator there. So to have some more of that kind of that college game aspect, maybe come into the Steelers offense a little bit. Certainly, I think they certainly can use it. A little bit more different, set of eyes and ears to look at and hear things. So a lot of what we said, and look, I mean, it'll help take a little bit of pressure off Randy Fichtner too when it comes to that quarterback room on top of it.
Absolutely. Colbert talked about the wide receiver depth, and he said, quote, "We do feel good about that group. It's a deep group. There are some dynamic players, some slot types, some big outside guys. We probably feel as good about that position as we do any other." Something we've mentioned time and time again, that receiver is arguably the strongest position, one of the deepest positions in this draft as well. And for a team that could use an extra receiver and a team that's waiting a while to pick for one, the fact that there is good depth and a good variety of talent is certainly beneficial, and we fully expect this team to draft a receiver at some point.
Yeah, and you want to talk about being surprised stars coming out of whatever this year's haul will be. I'll be surprised if they don't draft a wide receiver. I mean, we mentioned that several times. How many times over the last, even going back as long as Kevin Colbert has been here, there hasn't been too many years that this team didn't draft a wide receiver. And people say, well, why? I mean, why this year? Why early when you have guys like Juju and James Washington and obviously Deontay? I mean, why would you go that route? And here's the answer that I can give you. The main reason being, look, you hope Juju bounces back this year, obviously. I mean, there's no reason to think that Juju won't bounce back and potentially have a season similar that he did a couple years ago. But and assuming they don't extend his contract between now and the start of the regular season, which I think we both agree would be surprised if that happens, right?
Agreed.
Then what happens if he doesn't have that slam dunk, kind of a match of a season that he had, a couple years ago? Are you still going to franchise tag him? It kind of hard to justify doing that if he doesn't put up numbers at least similar or close to what he did a couple years ago. And then obviously if you don't franchise tag him, then you're running the risk of losing him via free agency, because once again, those hired kind of dollar guys, usually you don't re-sign them before the start of free agency. So you run the risk of losing him. And yeah, James Washington had really was glad to see the kind of season that James Washington had last season. But he's still in the developmental stage, and obviously with Johnson as well too. I mean, great rookie season. You hope to expound on that, but you need to keep that pipeline forward. I know a lot of people are high on Deion Kane and a couple of these other guys, but I mean, realistically, we're dealing with, a lot of bottom of the barrel kind of guys there. And I understand, Deion Kane did a lot of good things, or not a lot, but I mean, did some good things, but I don't think it's enough to bank on when it comes to him, especially when you have a potential maybe to get one of the top 10 wide receivers in this year's draft that can be versatile, but position flexible on top of it.
Right. My justification for it would be a little less about Juju's future, because I think he will bounce back. I think ultimately they probably will work out a long-term deal at some point or franchise tag him. But it's just about the value of depth of receiver. It's hard to be just 3 deep at the position if you're comfortable with that, because one injury, one change for whatever reason. Last year you thought you had Dante Moncrief as being your guy, falls apart right away, and you rely on Deontay Johnson, but you're glad you drafted that guy, because if you didn't, you were up a creek without a paddle. So I think you got to be at least 4 deep. It's like cornerback, just to protect yourself against injury, poor play, whatever else might happen along the way. And just the fact that this receiver class is that good. And when you're picking at 49, you got 2 picks in the top 102, you just want to find talent, find guys that can be on your team for, 4+ years, hopefully get a second contract and be a productive, member of your roster. So I'm not saying they will draft one early, though that's a possibility, but some point in the draft, they will draft one because the class is just that good.
Let's see. Asked if offense is a high priority in draft, Mike Tomlin said we have some position needs, but as we always do, we'll let the development do our work for us. There are a lot of good players on both sides of the ball. We're going to come out of this with guys that we need. Oh, he said need. Probably should have said want, right?
Yeah, all right. By the way, with the receivers, I think it was Jerry Dulac said that Colbert said that they've gotten the 40 times on all the receivers they're interested in. So they stick with the combine guys like 9 times out of 10. But if you're going receiver, stick with the guys that were at the combine.
Yes, most definitely. And look, I mean, I think in general, combine guys, all-star guys for seniors, right?
Yeah, I wrote the article today. Hearts and smarts on steroids. That's going to be the Steelers class. Guys that they know, guys with no character, medical concerns, Power 5. I mean, very typical Steelers class, but even more so. Crank that dial up to 11 because in a year of uncertainty, you just want to rely on guys that you know.
What about, what's your thoughts on some of these smaller school guys? The Liberty kid, the safety out of Lenore, how do you pronounce that school?
Lenore Ryan?
Yeah, Lenore Ryan. Duggar. And, obviously Troutman out of Dayton and all,
Mm-hmm. Are you asking my thoughts on their
just on
becoming a Steeler?
On smaller school kids potentially being Steelers this year.
It's just as
opposed to other years.
Yeah, it's just a tough sell because we know the history. They don't dip in that small school pool too often, and when they do, it's usually guys that they take a lot of interest in the pre-draft process. Where they're at their pro day, they're watching these guys in person. Obviously, guys that were at the combine, guys that were at All-Star games. Think about Javon Hargrave and all the work they did on him. So, I mean, it's hard to project and predict because we just don't know a whole lot. They interviewed 37 guys with FaceTime. We probably know maybe 10 of those at most if I go through everything. So it's just hard to project. But again, I think in a year where you want to be risk adverse, and for Pittsburgh, as I said, hearts and smarts, guys that they know well, guys where they feel comfortable with projecting them to the NFL, that would probably eliminate those small school guys even more. I'm not going to discount it entirely. We mentioned someone like Alex Highsmith from Charlotte, who they've shown interest in, and that's a guy you want to keep in mind. But I think it's even a tougher sell this year than years past, and those odds to begin with weren't very good.
If such a player was at the Senior Bowl and did almost everything at the combine, it's a little bit easier to kind of see those guys,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, a Trotman, for example, would be easier to project, but still a level of projection there that they might not be comfortable with. So I'm not going to rule it out because who knows? But I mean, the odds are, not great.
And obviously it's funny that Colbert mentioned, the amount of players, because look, I mean, the tape's the tape, right? And I think Tony Dungy reiterated what Chuck Noll used to say all the times, out on the road, I don't care what, something to the effect of don't take your stopwatches or believe what your stopwatches say or what you hear out on the road, if these college players can play, if the tape says they can play, they'll likely be able to play in the NFL.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you want to go tape first, second, and third, but, in today's era, we know how much that other information matters, and just trying to get the complete picture just because you want to be as risk adverse as possible. You can't avoid risk in the draft. It's inherent. It's baked into the cake, but you want to reduce and mitigate and minimize your chances of risk as much as possible. And I think in a year like that, if you got a medical issue, if you weren't at a combine, if you don't have times on you, if there's an off-the-field concern or whatever, Pittsburgh's going to stay away from those guys. They normally do anyway, but especially in a year like this.
All right. What else? Kind of newsy stuff do we have? Not much, obviously, the last few days, but I mean, what else is out there that we haven't wrapped up so we can move on?
Yeah, I think that was about it. For anything else from Colbert or Tomlin? Talked about Ben. Obviously excited to get Ben back in that room. Ben said we talked about Ben and not shaving his beard till he throws an NFL pass. Yeah, I think that was it from Colbert. We'll hear the whole thing after we finish recording the podcast. Maybe we'll find some other nugget of information in there, but that was about it.
All right.
Okay, Dave. We're doing a bunch of mock drafts. My final Steelers mock draft will go up Wednesday morning. I have my full 7-round mock draft will go up Thursday morning. I'm actually making good progress on that. I'm on pick 225, so I'm almost done with it. But we have the whole team done a great job this year with player profiles. So we obviously wanted all the guys, and Josh and Daniel and Tom and them, to be able to post their mock drafts. We can kind of run through some of their versions briefly of it. I thought Josh Carney's mock draft was really interesting. We went T. Higgins at 49, a name we really have not heard too much, though I think we talked about him on the previous show, of maybe a name to keep in the back of your mind come draft day on Friday. So T. Higgins at 49, what are your thoughts on that?
We tried to go out of our way the last show, right, to kind of make sure we talk a little bit more about guys that we haven't spent a lot of time talking about. And I think he is potentially one of them, just because not overly thrilled with the selection of tape that I saw. He's still probably going to be a top 50 player, or should be. Heck, Daniel Jeremiah, I think he has him ranked 27th overall in his final 150 there. I think he's wasn't he a little bit lower on Gil Brandt's rankings?
I believe so, yeah.
So, I mean, why is there a big swing on this kid?
I think we talked about this before. His pro day workout was underwhelming, and just the depth of this receiver class, and that pushed him down a little bit, I think.
Daniel Jeremiah writes, overall Higgins isn't going to do a lot of dirty work in the middle of the field, but he's very effective on the outside and provides big playability. I would agree with that. Just interested to see how kind of people are kind of all over the board with him. a guy that really started off this process after declaring as being kind of, I thought, considered a slam dunk first round guy.
Right, he was, but as this process has gone on and his pro day workout was poor, he didn't work out at the combine. I think it has pushed him down a little bit. So I think he's more likely he goes day 2 than day 1.
All right, what else do we have on Daniel's mock here? He actually, Josh's mock.
Yeah, he's got Rashad Lawrence in the 3rd round, nose tackle from LSU, who I've talked up and I think would be a great fit. Ben Bredson in round 4, the guard from Michigan. I think, sticking Power 5 as Josh is here with Clemson and Michigan guys. I do want to say, the one pro day this team was at this year, or at least Tomlin and Colbert were at, was Clemson. And that's going to carry a little extra weight because those are the few guys they got to really see up close and personal, go to pro day dinners with. And you can't deny that's going to help those guys when it comes to draft day.
Have you watched any more of Bretson out of Michigan? I've tried to get into him, man, and I just can't see it with him. I got him more as a 4th round guy, I guess, than anything there, and a little bit shorter.
Sounds about right.
A little bit shorter arms on him, I think, and just not feeling it, with him as being kind of a move guy.
Yeah, Josh has him in round 4, and I think that's about where he's going to go sometime early to mid day 3. Yeah, he's just a solid, consistent guy with a lot of starting experience. The upside is not super high, but I think the floor is relatively low. I believe I compared him to Mark Lewinsky, who's out with Indy right now, kind of reviving his career after a tough start in Seattle. Just a solid, consistent, big, powerful dude with a good anchor, not the best athlete, but good feet, technically sound, just kind of that classic Michigan lineman, and they got a bunch of those guys this year.
And Lawrence is a guy I think that you threw in your latest mock, right?
Yeah, big fan of Lawrence. Watched him a little bit more, watching some other guys in SEC football. He's got a little bit of pass rush juice too, but certainly be somebody that can plug the run.
All right, what else has he got to round that thing out?
He's got Brandon Jones, a safety from Texas.
Yeah, that's been a favorite of both of ours for a while.
The back from TCU, and A.J. Green, the corner from Oklahoma State, who the team also I think has shown a little bit of interest in as well.
Yeah, kind of interesting with him. What did you think about his overall tape?
Nah, not great.
Yeah, me either. I was a bit surprised to have that name surface. That was over the weekend, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, he can tackle a little bit. He's like Justin Lane if Justin Lane was a little more physical, but he's stiff, he's tall. The long speed isn't there. Not crazy about it.
Yeah, I wasn't crazy about his tape either when I went and looked at it. All right.
We have Tom's mock draft where he projected a trade, and he went interesting too, not only with the projection of the trade moving back, looked like 9 spots there, but and who they selected. He's got him going Malik Harrison, the inside linebacker from Iowa State. I'm a big fan of Harrison, but inside linebacker at 58, I'll admit, would be a bit surprising.
Yeah, I was a bit surprised to see Tom go that route as well too, but he is a sparky kid, right?
I like his game. If they sour on Vince Williams that much, and you made a good case for why they might not like Vince as much as I do, for example, then there's something there.
Yeah, look, I wouldn't bet my house for this not to happen. With Harrison being the guy, but. It's just look. There's another name that we really haven't talked about potentially being. And what was he on that? Was he? He wasn't in that group of players that we kind of identified, right? From Gil Brandt. Gil Brandt actually has. Where does he have Harrison?
I think lower. I don't think he was part of that 41 to 60 group we had talked about. I don't know exactly where Harrison came in, but I believe lower than 60.
Yeah, I don't remember us talking about him in that group either.
Mm-hmm. You can see the rest of the mock. He's got.
He's got 88 overall on Gil Brandt's list. Not, look. Not. It's just a point. The reason we use some of these key guys top 150s is just because of their track record. It doesn't mean that you can't take a guy that early. Look, if you look at, and honestly, I think I've got a question about this in the email somewhere saying, well, how do the Steelers picks, first couple round picks rank on the Gil Brandt list over the years? Well, quite honestly, they've been, the Steelers kind of reach, if you will, according to Gil Brandt's list. Heck, you go back a couple years ago with Artie and Edmonds, and then even Watt. I think Watt was Gil Brandt's biggest miss as far as first round picks go, a couple years ago. I think he had him ranked something like 60 something overall on his list, and obviously the Steelers took him in the first round there. So it's just a point of reference, but I think overall, I think I wrote about this in some previous Gil Brandt kind of articles as well too. Is when it comes to Gil Brandt's list and the Steelers kind of quote unquote, I guess, reach, if you will, when it comes to most recent drafts. Now, look, I mean, when you look at, I think, Sutton, he had kind of right on the money where Sutton was, and then look, even Juju a couple years ago, I think he had Juju, I don't know, 25th overall or something like that, and obviously they got Juju a little bit later,
Yeah, obviously not going to be one-to-one with the Steelers board looks like and what Gil Brandt's board looks like. Tom also has Brandon Jones. I think most of our guys, and I might do the same, are going safety round 3, round 4, so that puts you kind of in classic Brandon Jones or Kayvon Wallace territory seems to be the flavor here.
I think Winfield, Jones, or Wallace, I think those are 3 true safety guys that you could really see the Steelers get, right? I mean, if we were to build a list of defensive players that we think the Steelers like heading into this draft, say a list of, 25 defensive players that we think the Steelers like, those 3 would probably be on it, right?
They would, but at different spots. Winfield is 49,
sure.
And Jones and Wallace are 102, 124, 135. So different spots, but yeah, all makes sense.
Sure.
Let's see what else. He does have an interesting pick in the 7th round with Quez Watkins from Southern Miss, who had a really good combine workout. And again, just kind of speaks to the depth in this class, because like last year, Quez Watkins might be an early day 3 pick. Here, he's got him in the 7th round. So you can check out the whole mock there. With Daniel Valente's mock went up today on Steelers Depot, and he's going maybe a little more conventional here with Cam Akers at 49. And I've said it before. I mean, assuming that Jonathan Taylor is gone, which I'm leaning yes that Jonathan Taylor won't be there at 49 in terms of backs that would fit what the team looks for and kind of reading the tea leaves. I'm leaning Cam Akers.
It's probably going to be like we said. Look, we already recapped the top 5. I don't think either one of us think DeAndre Swift's going to be on the board there.
Right.
Right. And then it really kind of goes off the rails in different directions depending on, the flavor and the kind of the style I think that you like. Edward Solaire, obviously. I just have a hard time viewing Dobbins, being a Steelers kind of back. But I mean, look, it's not impossible for them to take one if early. As we said. Now, it's not my cup of tea, and I still kind of lean toward what I've said all along, especially based on what we talked about earlier in this show. I wonder why Kevin Colbert's going out of his way to make sure. Well, remember, we got James Conner. But I mean, look, I don't think they're going to lock themselves in. Quite honestly, to be honest with you, I think that a good 4 of these backs are already off the board by the time the Steelers pick, and then it becomes a question of whether or not they view the 5th, and if that 5th is Cam Akers, as being worthy of that 2nd round selection.
Yeah, the question is, is Akers going to be, as you said, the value of 49? Is that going to be enough? Because
he's another guy that people seem to be all over the place on. I think most everybody, or not. No, that's too broad. I think quite a few of the draft nicks have Akers outside of their top 4, and then.
Brandt's got him at like 100 overall.
Right. I think PFF has him, in the 70s or 80s. I forget exactly where I wrote him up at. But Akers seems to be the guy that's not so much consensus top 50, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Now, to be fair, if we're going with history here, the Steelers reaching on players in terms of like Gil Brandt's board, maybe Cam Akers makes more sense then.
Sure.
So he fits. He's got the size. He's got good production. Like I said, NC State recruited him coming out of high school. I'm betting Eddie Faulkner was a part of that. He checked every box except for weight, where he missed by just 3 pounds. Feels like a Steelers back.
Definitely had to make a lot out of a little there.
Yeah,
at Florida State. So did a good job catching the football and all. So And the thing is, too, who was the back I was trying to look at? Maybe it was him in the pass protection. Did they play? Was it? Didn't they play Clemson this past year? I think they did, right?
I don't know the schedule. I imagine they
I'm getting my tape screwed up, but I think, and I just watched that a couple of days ago. If you want to see Cam Akers in pass protection, watch the Clemson game.
Okay,
that's what I have in my notes.
Was it good? Was it?
Yeah, I mean, it was more than adequate. Okay, I'll put it to you that way. I mean, look, you're not going to find. I don't think you're going to find a running back, one of these top 5 running backs coming out where you're going to say, oh, man, I just was enthralled with his pass protection. You know, he's NFL ready, but I remember thinking, okay, I better go back and watch some of these kids and drill back down in pass protection on a few of these top running backs there. And I did, and I was most impressed with what Akers did, and especially in that Clemson game. So if any of you listening want to check out, I think a good game tape to watch is FSU versus Clemson to see Akers in pass protection.
And I'm reading what Daniel wrote here. Akers is only 20 still? Is that? Can you exact age on that?
I will find that for you while you talk.
Yeah, and which is another feather in the cap because you're getting a running back that's younger, a little less wear and tear on him as well, which is going to be helpful for him down the line. But yeah, I mean, just what he did behind that terrible Florida State offense, like he was a chicken salad at a chicken you-know-what kind of guy because they just offense was terrible. He just had guys in the backfield, half the time, and he was still productive and learned how to create and make guys miss. And for me, running backs that can create and make their own way and not just get what's blocked. It's like one of the biggest things I look for because if you can do that and create and get yards when nothing's there, then you're going to be able to get yards when it's blocked well. So I think Cam Akers does check a lot of the boxes his team looks for.
Cam Akers will turn 21 in June.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, if they want to go young at the top, which is where they generally go, Akers would fit.
Where was he missing in the what the Steelers look for?
Weight by 3 pounds by cheeseburger.
And that was it, right?
That was it. Weight was the only category he missed. So the threshold was 220. He came in at 217 at the combine.
All right, so he would be where they pick, and based on what they look for, and combine and everything, he would be the least surprising of the 5, probably, right?
Well, I put Taylor up there too because I think Taylor's a perfect fit in terms of what they look for. But is Taylor good? Obviously, Taylor's a lot less likely to be there at 49 than Cam Akers was almost certainly going to be there at 49.
All right, Hamilton. Look, I like he's talking about Daniel's mock Devon Hamilton in round 3. I think this is a guy that people that I was hot on coming out of shoot, and then I think people kind of cooled off on him, and now I think it's kind of the draft community is kind of circling back to him a little bit.
Yeah, I think for us to go nose tackle, which I think we're all going to probably put a nose tackle in, mid rounds. You're either going Lawrence or Hamilton, and I think Tom went Lawrence and Daniel goes Hamilton, and I don't think there's no wrong answer there.
How surprised will you be if this team does not draft a defensive tackle, nose tackle capable guy? Obviously the traditional, Steve McClendon, Casey Hampton kind of guys. They've obviously kind of gotten a little ways away from, a little bit more.
I wouldn't compare McClendon to Hampton.
A little taller guys, a little taller guys over the years since Hampton.
Yeah.
In other words, not those 330, 6'1" ones.
Well, McClendon was like 290 coming out of Troy, I think. He was a little different body
type.
Right,
but he quickly kind of,
he got his weight up.
Right.
Would I be surprised? I believe they need the draft one. I don't think they have the guys on the roster to do it. I don't know how to gauge what they feel about it. I mean, they should be sitting there going, oh, my God, we have this giant hole at nose tackle. It's the only place on the roster where we don't have a starter. If the season began today, should be screaming, saying, we got to fix this. I don't know if they're going to or not. And, again, with only 6 picks and a lot of needs and the lack of value in terms of the snap count on the position, I don't know what direction they're going to go in. I will be upset if they don't address it. I don't know how surprised I would be by it.
Kayvon Wallace, back to Hamilton finishing up here. I really like this play against the run.
Yeah, I mean that's what you're drafting him for is to be the guy against.
As far as a pat, I don't think his I don't think his ceiling as a pass rusher is that of what we saw in exiting Javon Hargrave.
Oh yeah, not a chance. But that's fine.
But I think he can be a push the pocket guy.
Yeah, I think him and Lawrence could fit that bill really well. And again, Power 5, Ohio State, good competition, easier to project those guys than some others. Yeah, Kayvon Wallace in the 4th round, again, safety. It's either Brandon Jones, Kayvon Wallace. Both, I think, fit this team, what they look for really well.
All right, and who does he have trickling on down there? Sadiq Charles, a guy kind of started off kind of hotter on, but cooled off a little bit throughout the process. But I mean, look, if you could you kick him inside? Yeah, I don't know if we have enough.
You're doing Gerald Hawkins 2.0. I mean,
yeah, I mean, I'm less confident about that.
Yeah, I could see the argument for it. I actually had Charles in my very first mock draft, but there are some off-the-field concerns, some maturity concerns, and again, in a year like this, will the Steelers feel comfortable enough with those questions being answered? So that one's a little more out there, but I get it. Young, apparently, as Daniel says, not turning 21 until July, so like our core for a developmental option, a young guy that hasn't played a lot of football, but a high ceiling. So if the off-the-field will be okay, if there wasn't that concern, I could see it a lot more. But I get where Daniel's head is at here.
And obviously 6th round Evan Weaver. That's boy, that's one guy that if you were to build a list of say 10 that you thought, man, we think the Steelers really, really, really like this kid, and especially from a special team standpoint, Evan Weaver would be on that list.
Yeah, him or Tanner Muse. Now, I think Muse is going to go higher. I think Weaver potentially could go higher than the 6th round as well. But yeah, I mean, a very Medikevich-like player, maybe a little better defensively, maybe a little higher ceiling than Medikevich, but right in that area. And then AJ Green, the corner in the 7th round, which I think is the same thing that Tom Mead did.
Yeah, and I think that was a late kind of, I need a guy to get, because you could go, I found myself trying to already work together my last mock draft saying, boy, how many different ways could I go with that last pick? I even thought about, should I throw Charlie Warner in there? Kind of thing, but I think that's too much of my bias, and I, look, we'll see how this thing plays out there, but the AJ Green pick all of a sudden showing up in these guys' mocks might just have something to do with, oh, well, he's the last guy that we kind of heard, them kind of maybe having or having a virtual kind of meeting with there.
Yeah, I mean, he could move to safety. I'd probably actually like Green more at safety than at corner based on his skill set. And for whatever it's worth, probably not a whole lot, but some draft nicks and projections have Green as more of a mid-day 3 pick as opposed to a late day 3 pick. I think corner, though, is possible. I think they could draft one. Obviously, Hayden, his contract only runs through 2021. Hilton, Sutton, free agents after the season. I'm not going to be shocked if they draft a corner. Maybe even more of a slot option, knowing that you're almost guaranteed to lose one of Hilton or Sutton this season or after the season. So corner wouldn't shock me, but I would not love the Green pick.
And Daniel addresses this after his mock, no receiver, which I think probably has a lot of people surprised. And then he doesn't have an edge rusher in this one.
Yeah, and again, I really think that the one position they're going to draft that might surprise people is edge rusher, where I think that's going to happen sooner rather than later.
Speaking of edge, I guess that's a good time to segue. Do we have any more of the mocks? And those are the guys that have theirs most recently up on the site, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Speaking of edge defenders, Zach Bowen, guy that there was the report that came out, I think, last week about him announcing that he had a little bit of a dirty, because of too much water intake, caused
diluted sample.
Diluted sample or whatnot. I'm not so much concerned about that, to be honest with you, as I am the fit himself. When you look at and this is a guy you saw at the Senior Bowl, right?
Was he at the Senior Bowl? I believe he was. I'm trying to think back. I think you're right.
I think he was at the Senior Bowl, but a guy that played quite a bit on the edge, and he's another one of these guys like Uche that people are saying, okay, maybe a little bit too light to play on the edge, but could be off the ball. Yeah. Where do you, and a lot of people have him in the first round and maybe have him slipping out of, because of maybe this latest news, maybe have him slipping out of the first round into the second round and maybe right into the wheelhouse of the Steelers there. Where do you come in? I went back and said, well, okay, what am I missing on him? And that makes him attractive to the Steelers. And I kind of came came away with kind of the same thoughts that I have on Uche there. Except Zach Bond, I view as a little bit better outside the edge, around the tackle pass rusher. But once again, just not any experience off the ball.
Well, yeah, I mean, Uche has experience off the ball. Yeah, Bond would be, I guess, more of a projection there.
But Uche doesn't have that much experience off the ball.
He's got some. He did it at Michigan. He did it at the Senior Bowl. He did it all week down there. So
that's not game experience, though.
Well, I think he played off ball during the game. I mean,
but not as much as people I don't think make it out. That he did.
Okay, I mean, I feel comfortable enough from what I've seen that he's got some tape out there at least to tell me how well he plays in space and functions in coverage. Anyway, to go back to Bond, yeah, he's more of a projection. Is he an edge? Is he an inside linebacker? I just feel like he's not going to be there at 49. I mean, I feel like he's got a really good chance to go in the first round, especially in a class where this edge class, this pass rush class is relatively weak, and yeah, there's some concerns about can Bond be an every down type of guy to set the edge against the run. But man, this class is starving for pass rush help, and for a guy like that to slip to 49 or even come close to that, I think it's a stretch.
Where do you have Zach Bond? I mean, do you have him as an off the ball candidate, or do you have him as kind of you put him more situationally, or what?
Yeah, I've always thought of him more of an edge, maybe even more so than a guy like Uche. So when I think of Zach Bond, I mean, I think somebody that could be versatile, work in a hybrid front and wear different hats, but I've always kind of thought him as more of an outside linebacker and edge rusher.
Then Uche, right?
More so. I mean, I think Uche can play both, as I've said, but even more so than Uche, yes.
All right. Do you even consider him if you're the Steelers, if for some reason he's there at 49?
Sure. I mean,
are you running up to turn? As the proverbial saying goes, are you running up to turn the card in? Sprinting up to turn the card in on a guy like that.
I don't know if I go that far, but yeah, I mean, the first question would be just why is he falling that far? Are there that many concerns about this diluted sample and other character stuff that could go in? I have no idea, but that would be the question I'm asking myself. But yeah, I mean, as I've said, you have Colbert talking about how unusually strong this edge class is. I think Jared Dulac had a report that this team wants to really find better edge depth because they're having their pass rushers, wanting to go after the quarterback more. It's more physically taxing. They want to have better depth if those guys get dinged up or just need more rotational work because they're going after the quarterback time and time again and right there in the trenches. So, yeah, I think that edge is probably going to be a position that gets taken at least by the fourth round, at least by one of those two picks and potentially higher than that.
See, where I come in with Zach is I could see him more on the edge than I can Uche,
Yeah, I agree there.
Especially if you put a little bit, if you add a few more pounds to him or whatnot, he just, and kind of his pass rush style, I can see him more off the edge than I can Uche, and, I can't visualize him hardly any off the ball. People saying, well, he's a plug and play next to Devin Bush. I don't see that.
Yeah, I think plug and play would be too much. I just view Bond, and maybe I'm wrong on this, but I view him as a first rounder. Spoiler alert, in my full 7-round mock draft, I have him going in the first round, I believe. So okay. That's my feel of it. But maybe he drops a little bit, but I still don't see him going to 49.
All right, let's talk about a few more of these edges. Go on down to a guy like DJ Wanham.
Yeah, I was excited to watch him at first because he has the length and some size and some measurables that kind of fit, but his tape was unimpressive. I'll pull up my scouting report on him. He's long, lean, a really thin lower half, fairly robotic. The bend isn't there. He's not particularly strong. I mean, he's got the length advantage, 34-inch arms, I believe, but really not that impressive in tape. Guy that just really struggles to go backwards. Again, I know they're dropping guys in the coverage less, around 10%, but just a wiry frame. Is going to be 23. He's not flexible, not strong. I don't know how he's going to win in the NFL.
I was surprised to see Daniel Jeremiah has him in his top 150.
Yeah, too rich for me. I view him as a big project.
I view him as a 6th or 7th rounder. Is what I have here.
Yeah, not someone I'm interested. Even in a weak class like this, I don't see it.
All right, where's Highsmith? Someone had asked us about Derek. Pronounce his last name.
I don't know.
Yeah. But I went. Obviously, not a lot of tape on North Dakota State guy, except for kind of the big games. He was a guy that compiled a lot of stats. I mean, 15 sacks last year. The thing about him, and he's another one like the kid out of Michigan State, though, and there's quite a few of these kind of later round edge guys, if you will, that just never played on their feet, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And he is one of them. You know, one of the things I go to look for when scanning the tape on some of these kind of tweener types is, did they rush the passer any on, you know, from standing up, and just hard to find that with him.
Yeah, the worry isn't so much for me about that, because a lot of guys in college didn't do that. Most teams run a 4-3. Most of those guys just want to go forward because they rush the passer. They aren't worried about dropping into coverage or moving around. They just want to do their thing well. It's about, do they have the traits and the tools to be able to play on their feet? Do they have the athleticism, the flexibility, the bend, the change of direction ability? And I think a guy like Wilkie, so you mentioned, probably doesn't have that, or as opposed to someone like Alex Highsmith, I think has those traits where you can say, I'm more comfortable with them making that slight transition, as opposed to maybe someone like Wilkie's, where I'm not as comfortable in that projection.
Are people still with Highsmith? Is he, you know, fourth, fifth? Is fourth still a little bit too rich for him?
I think I would say top 150 for him, which puts him mid fourth round as a later fourth round as a floor. I think he's someone that could sneak into the top 100 or so, to be honest with you. Again, in a year where there just aren't pass rushers in this class. I mean, it's Chase Young and everybody else. I think a guy like Highsmith could go higher than anticipated.
And this goes back to, you know, us talking about Kevin Colbert saying, well, this is a deeper edge class. I still ain't seeing it. I'm trying to, you know, I find myself trying to fit in an edge somewhere, you know, round 4 or 5, you know, or 4, 6 or 7 in my mock. And I'm going, man, where's this deep list, you know?
Well, at the top, Weaver, Taylor are some names that do fit well.
And I wonder if Weaver's being kind of over, you know, in other words, ranked a little bit too high.
I wish you would have tested. I don't know testing on him, and that makes me a little uncomfortable. And Taylor didn't test either, now that I think about it.
Do you think the Steelers will draft a edge that did not test?
Yeah, I think it's possible. Because the options are kind of thin right now. So, I mean, you rely on the tape there. I don't think that they wouldn't draft somebody that didn't test. It would obviously be more difficult and a little more projection there, uncertainty. But yeah, I think that they could. You
know, you go through some of this list, these other names here, like who was the North Carolina State kid?
From this year? Like Murchison?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm drawing a blank on him. Oh, no, James Smith-Williams
okay.
Is a guy. I just can't get into him either, you know.
Yeah.
Sluggish, you know, more of an undrafted guy. I kind of viewed him coming away from his tape. I know Trayvon Hill showed up in a mock draft recently. I forget whose mock draft that was. Was it Dane Brugler, I think? Had Trayvon Hill as like a 6th or 7th round guy, but didn't he got kicked out of one school for, I forget where he was, that he transferred out of Miami, but kind of got dropped from their program, so that, you know, you fall into the hearts and smarts and kind of wonder about the character concerns in a year like this. Basically what I'm getting at is, I'm still not finding deep names in this class.
Mm-hmm. Yep, slim pickings, to me at least. But based on Colbert's comments and the lack of depth, there is a depth issue. And what Dulac's saying, I feel like we got to start in the way that a core four was that surprise pick in the 3rd round at tackle. Was this 2 years ago? I think Edge might be in that similar boat.
All right, let's. I think you wanted. We ended up talking about a lot of defensive players here, but I think you wanted to focus, or we wanted to focus on talking about offensive players throughout this year's draft class that we think the Steelers like.
Yeah, I figured we just kind of today would be an overview of the offense and kind of what positions we think they're going to draft and some names that fit well. And then Wednesday's show, we'll do the defensive side of things. And then Friday, obviously, we'll talk about what happened in round 1 and kind of a better projection of how round 2 is going to go. So we know, quarterback, very unlikely. Running back is the big debate, and I warmed up to the idea slightly in terms of what they will do, but I still have reasons against why they shouldn't do it. But if it is a running back, we know they want guys with size and they want guys with production. And so Jonathan Taylor, if he slips, is going to be very much at the top of their list. Cam Akers, who we just talked about. Any other running backs, even maybe more mid to later round guys that you think at least fit what the Steelers look for?
Yeah, I can't see it. And maybe the Appalachian State kid.
Yeah, they've talked to Darrington Evans. Did you watch any of Darrington Evans?
Just a little bit,
Yeah, he's shifty, he's speedy, but he's never going to pass protect. That dude does not like the pass pro.
I went deeper into Siwo's tape and all, and I mean, big back.
Do you see the bell comps with him that I keep hearing about? I know Josh is a big fan of him.
I see a more kind of patient runner. Maybe that's, but I mean, it's still not even near what Bell did.
Does not have the production. He's not.
Well, I mean, look. I mean, you want to talk about comparing the two and not having the explosive, being the explosive play producer. He certainly wasn't that. Yeah. At TCU. So obviously a bit of a. He would be I mean, you already have that in Connor and Snell, and he would be a guy that you think, okay, drop a little bit of weight. Going into your second season. How many times are we going to go through this?
Apparently a lot, because that's all they've been drafting.
All right. So he would. I think he's. I view him more as a kind of a fifth round guy.
Yeah.
Grade.
Yeah. Antonio Gibson from Memphis, who I've talked about a lot. Again, lack of production, but man, I mean, big size, 228 pounds, but dynamic receiver, runner, returner. I think he fits perfectly. Just he does not have the production.
Once again, it goes back to my thoughts on this. If they're gonna get one, just go ahead and get one early. Instead of just throwing another log on the fire.
Yeah, but I'd say if they do want to go later, Josh Kelly from UCLA, they're going to love him. He would definitely check hearts and smarts with good productivity and size and a downhill run demeanor. Michael P. Ryan, you can say the same about him from Florida. Anthony McFarland from Maryland. Matt Canada, was he there with Matt Canada? Probably. Really exciting player, small, shifty, fun in the open field. I really enjoyed watching him on a pretty bad Maryland team.
All right, offensive line.
I warmed up to tackle some, and I think we've had these discussions, but I'm just trying to find the name that fits, because this tackle class is really good at the top, but there's a pretty steep drop-off after those first, let's say, 7 or 8 names go, and I think you're going to see at least 6 go in the first round, and then a couple go early second round, so just trying to find what tackle could fit in terms of the talent being worthy at 49 if most of those guys are gone. But I do get the debate and the argument for drafting a tackle because of all the guys that are slated to hit free agency next year, Villanueva, Fowler, and Zach Banner.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked. And we've had this conversation a couple of shows ago. Look, I mean, can a guy like Ezra Cleveland, kind of the bottom end, maybe of the top, top 2 tiers, slide? I mean, Daniel Jeremiah has him 53rd overall. In his, not that me, but look, I mean, if you're looking for a young, smart guy that could develop, that you don't have to worry about getting on the field right away, Cleveland would fit that when it comes to the tackles.
Yeah, it sounds like fitting enough that the Browns are really interested in Ezra Cleveland. I still think he's going to be a first-round pick. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but I think he's going to go in the top 32.
Outside of that, I mean, once you get past him, the past those top 6 or 7, like you said, it's kind of hard really to find a guy that you say, okay, well, this is a guy we can develop into being a starting, left, right, whatever,
Yeah, I mean, then you're going to go into Sadiq Charles, who you mentioned earlier, Josh Jones, but I don't think he's going to slip that far, Lucas Niang from TCU, Tom had mocked, I don't struggle with the last name here, Prince Tega Wanago from Auburn.
He's got an interesting backstory,
Yeah, what's the story there?
Just obviously coming from overseas. I think he didn't have kind of a surrogate family over here and all, but you want to talk about a kid that just really hit the books hard and really likable kid. You want to talk about hearts and smarts? He's got it.
Yeah.
He's going to be a guy I bet the Steelers like from a character end of it and all.
All right, that's interesting. Potentially, if they wanted to go third, fourth round with him.
Google a story on him. For sure.
Cool. And then in terms of interior guys, where it's a weaker class, but in terms of, again, 6 or 7 tackles are gone before Pittsburgh picks up 49, there might only be one interior lineman taken before 49 comes rolling around. We've talked about the names. Ruiz, I don't think he's going to be there, but it would be certainly a tempting pick for Pittsburgh. Hennessy, Cushenberry, we rattled those names off several times before.
Yeah, starting off this thing several months ago, everything that you read was that Biadish, was the top center. Well,
Yeah.
now, you look at the tape and you get through the process around here, more of a third, fourth rounder,
Well, there's a medical concern, I think, with a shoulder with him.
Cushenberry, boy, it's just all over the place on Cushenberry. I mean, some people have him, slam dunk second round all the way down to fourth round.
Mm-hmm.
So if he was an inch taller,
how tall is he? He's tall, isn't he?
6'3",
Does he need to be 6'4"? I don't think 6'3" is a
I'm
good
just
height.
saying, if he was another inch taller, would we be, because look, he's got the long arms, he's got some of the biggest hands, I think, in this year's class on top of it.
Yeah, size is not an issue for me with Lloyd Cushenberry.
All right, so I mean, he is a guy too. When you go back to his early days, here's a guy Canada probably knows a little bit about him. I think from maybe Cushenberry's freshman year, I think. But Cushenberry, when he first cracked the lineup, I thought as a reserve, it was at left guard too. So he's got a little bit of guard experience in his pocket there, and obviously mostly played center there in and up his career. But if you want to look at a guy that's a little bit, has a little bit of position flexibility to him, or should, it would be him. Now the question is where is his true value at?
Yeah, where do I have him in my full 7-round mock?
And Matt Hennessy as well too. I mean, this is a guy. Some people say this guy is the slam dunk top center in this year's draft. But you also see him third, fourth round.
Yeah, I think he's going to go top 75, worst case scenario. I have Cushenberry going in the second round. Maybe that's a touch strong, but I really like his game. I love his competitiveness. Maybe the concern with Cushenberry is he kind of maxed out? Is he just, this is as good as it gets with him, and the upside in terms of him getting better might not be there as it is with some other guys like Ruiz, for example.
Yeah, we talked about Ben Bredesen. I just didn't see it in his tape. You're talking about interior guys. Who else?
How about some of the Lafayette guys? Robert Hunt at right tackle, Kevin Dotson at right guard, one of the best run blockers in this draft. The team did have interest in Kevin Dotson, who was an AP All-American, first Raging Cajun ever, I think, to be first team AP All-American. So that's a name you should watch out for.
Logan Stenberg could be potential as well. The guy had a lot of penalties, though.
Oh, did he?
But a lot. I think you don't have to worry about him playing through the echo with a whistle.
And I'm sure when they watched that Benny Snell tape last year, they were watching Logan Stenberg a lot of the time.
Just wasn't as fluid on the move as I'd like, but you know what got me is sometimes you judge these, especially these interior offensive linemen, a little bit too much by their shape and size.
Yeah. It's a weird body kind of.
Physical appearance. When you go back and look at Alan Faneca years ago, coming out of LSU. Yeah, he didn't look all that. He looked wider. He didn't look like he had much of his shape, to be honest with you. He looked more of like I kind of thought like a box. But boy, he obviously became a great NFL tackle, and he got his physique kind of a little bit more sculptured at the NFL level and all. So I'm a little bit hard, and you obviously you go back and look at Faneca's college tape. If you remember back, he got the job done. Out in space on that, and because I like teams that run that power and get those guards out in space and on the move, I probably judged him a little bit too close on that. About how they are on the move and all like that. And Logan Stenberg is one of those guys I thought, man, I just don't see it with him on the move. And Ben Bredesen out of Michigan is another one of those guys. I think the Steelers probably, in other words, I think I'm a little bit too critical of these guys on the move. And the other thing about Stenberg, much like Ben Bredesen, a little bit shorter arms there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if they were in that Foster role at left guard, you just say let the cashier do all the pull, and our left guard's not going to have to pull, that much, and that would mitigate that issue. But yeah, I'm not crazy about either. About Mutai from Fresno State, and Attain Mutai, one of the best talents in this class.
He just can't stay healthy, man.
Yeah, he's got laundry list of injury history.
Definitely, when he's healthy, man, he is a mauler. I mean,
he even played some left tackle for Fresno State, but
Go back and isn't he? You go back. Who was it? Ed Oliver, the defensive tackle. I think there's some tape out there. Mutai just destroying him.
pancaked him on the one play. Yeah, but again, he's got what, 2 torn Achilles, another injury. I mean, it's a mess medically.
Yeah, definitely to me, if he fell for some reason, which it would probably be because of medical, maybe you take a chance on. But other than that, I mean, it's too much risk early in this draft to take a guy like him.
Yep, tight end.
I mean, if he stayed healthy throughout his college career, heck, he'd easily be a first round guy, I think.
Yep, I think so too. 44 reps on the bench for him, so really impressive number. But the health is obviously the concern. Tight end. I know we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about it. If you had to guess that, okay, they're going to draft X tight end, do you have a name, someone you just feel like might fit?
From the guys that went to the combine,
or anyone, I guess.
It would be Colby Parkinson, a guy that Tom Mead's kind of been on right from the start out of Stanford. I think, early going through this thing, you thought, okay, Parkinson may be 6th round guy. I think really by the time you get through all this list and kind of restack them and all at this position, he might be a guy that comes off the board 3rd or 4th round, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I got him in the 4th in my full mock draft. I think, Parkinson's a really good name, kind of a sleeper pick. I might lean Trotman if he's there. I think he might be at 102, for example. But
I don't dislike Troutman, but him and Parkinson, I think, are if you're looking for more true kind of tight ends, guys that can function on the end of the line of scrimmage and give you something out in the passing game and all like that, I think those two are it from a traditional standpoint. Cole Kmet has got some athleticism to him. It's going to take some time still for him to kind of develop. I mean, he's obviously still a young kid on top of it. So, get to the NFL season, you obviously probably want to play him a little bit, whatever team gets him early. But a guy more in line that you're looking at, maybe his floor being ways down the road, as opposed to maybe guys like we just talked about with Troutman and Parkinson, who really are kind of at, what you see is probably what you get.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, again, tight end class is not the best this year. I only have 1 tight end going in the top 2 rounds in my full 7-round mock draft. So
you've come a long way since.
Well, I still like some of these guys, but just in the reality of it, we know that the Eric Ebron signing is the one position, the one signing where it's like, okay, they're probably not going to take a tight end now because they've signed X in free agency. And that's just the reality of it.
Hunter Bryant is a guy that can offer a team kind of the who was the guy that just got cut by the Bears.
Trey Burton.
Right. Kind of that kind of I think player. A guy that could give you a little something in the passing game. Obviously, not going to probably give you much of benefit in the run blocking category there. But that Hunter Bryant's another guy that early in this process people had slam dunk, top 2 tight end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll give you one sleeper. Dalton Keene from Virginia Tech wasn't used a whole lot, but he's got a good body, good after the catch. I think he could go higher in a weak class. But yeah, I mean, I will admit I've come a long way in the sense of singing Thad Moss's praises. That's a guy I got too overhyped on at the beginning, and I learned my lesson on that one pretty quickly.
Devin Asiasi is another one that I kind of like. If you want to kind of stack them, Troutman, Parkinson, maybe Asiasi, falls in that category. I just didn't see it with Harrison Bryant out of and I tried with Hopkins, with your boy Hopkins.
I still like Hopkins. I think
I couldn't see it with him. Who else on this list?
That's about it.
Albert O. I don't get it. I mean, I get the time speed, but I didn't see that on tape.
Yeah,
and maybe an okay blocker, but I just didn't see.
A-okay.
Yeah, A-okay. Yep. And of course, Charlie Warner's going to be somebody going to get them a steal of Charlie Warner later in the draft.
Yeah, good blocker. DeGora from Cincinnati, good H-back type, probably going to go early day 3. And Charlie T, kind of a similar boat out of Portland State.
I think Chris Cooley's going to be very disappointed with when the 3rd round ends and Charlie Warner's still on the board there. But look, this is a guy that I've kind of cautioned along the way. I like him, but I don't like him. I don't Chris Cooley like him. third or fourth round. But look, if you get into the fifth or sixth round, Alex, and you need a guy that maybe can be that second tight end for you, maybe with a ceiling down the road and is a tough projection to say maybe this guy could be your starting tight end, a guy that can maybe help you on special. Charlie Warner's that guy, so I don't see why you wouldn't want to spend a sixth or seventh round pick on a Charlie Warner.
Well, it's just you can find blocking tight ends pretty easily, I think, in a vet minimum deal in free agency. And
Where?
I just don't find draft capital. And I don't know. I mean, Luke Wilson, you could have signed off the street last year to give you a good blocking tight end. That's what Seattle ended up doing. It's what Pittsburgh probably should have ended up doing.
All right, defensive line.
Defensive line. We're doing offense. We're gonna go.
I thought we
receiver,
already did offensive line. Oh no, receiver. We didn't.
Yeah, Wednesday will be the defensive preview. The receiver is the one position for offense remaining, and probably the one we talked about for hours. And Michael, in terms of I think the guys who really fit what this team looks for offensive skill positions are like Cam Akers and Michael Pittman, who we've talked about a lot. I'm not saying I even love the guy to that extent, but just in terms of what fits, Pittman fits really well.
I think he's on top of the list when it comes to wide receiver. People say we haven't talked about Chase Claypool enough. I just view him as maybe a round later guy, With Claypool, I mean, you go down the list. Duvernay, you have to think they like Duvernay. Even though I'm not a huge Bryan Edwards fan, I kind of have Bryan Edwards out of South Carolina in that that third round talk along with Claypool. Van Jefferson's another one I have in that that third or fourth round area that I think the Steelers might be interested with. Look, I love Justin Jefferson. I just don't think he's going to be there. T. Higgins is a guy that we talked about potential. Do they love T. Higgins though the way maybe some of these other guys on the list?
I don't know. I mean, we don't know a whole lot about it, I guess, just because of lack of information. But we know they were at Clemson's pro day. I'm speculating, but I'm guessing they had a pro day dinner with him. It was not just Tanner Muse and Tomlin and Colbert. So, and he's got the production. He's got the size they look for. And, yeah, he's not a great athlete, but the Eagles haven't drafted great tested athletes. Juju, Deontay Johnson, James Washington, none of those guys tested off the charts.
I never saw it. I mean, I kind of get it with Laviska Shenault, but I can't picture him being Steelers material. And plus, he's coming off of a core muscle. Yeah,
got a lot of injuries.
He's had some issue there. Look, the guys that we've talked about throughout this process, Rager, Mims out of Baylor, would not be surprising to see either one of those kids. We haven't talked a lot about him, but Donovan Peoples-Jones is really a wide receiver I think the Steelers would like. If they could get him, fourth round. I doubt he falls into the sixth. Barring the Steelers not picking up a fifth or something like that. I think Peoples-Jones is a guy is a wide receiver that would really fit what the Steelers maybe like in the fourth round, and a guy that we really haven't talked a lot about. And if you're looking if you have to find a way to get a Michigan guy into your mock. He would probably be it. He'd give you something on a return, on a return and special teams aspect as well too. So I think he's definitely, if we were to build a list of say 10 wide receivers here, I would go Claypool, I would go Duvernay, Edwards, Higgins, Van Jefferson. Pittman, obviously, Rager, Mims, and there you go. Yeah, and Donovan Peoples-Jones.
It does feel like they're straying away from the toolsy receivers of the Sammy Coates, Martavis Bryant ilk, as opposed to guys that just were more productive, like Juju and James Washington and Deontay Johnson. So I could see the allure Peoples-Jones. Someone will fall in love with the height, weight, speed, whole measurables of it. I think it's a less likely chance because they want guys who've done it and feel like a cleaner projection. So other guys to mention, KJ Hamler from Penn State, one of the fastest players in this draft, a slot option, certainly could bring a big play element this offense really needs. James Prochet is a less fast option, but also a slot option later on day three. I've been a big fan of Van Jefferson, but the age factor, the foot injury, that's going to be an issue for him. Joe Reed from Virginia, which I give you a return game, a little gadget-ish player, really good speed, really good in the open field. I like KJ Hill as a classic slot option. Then the guy that Dave T mentioned later on day 3, Marquez Callaway from Tennessee, who I watched and put a profile up on today, where he's just a jump ball machine. He's got to get better off press coverage, but he's got the size and frame to do it. He's got some big play vertical ability in terms of just that contested catch guy that actually reminds me in a lot of ways of James Washington.
Players not named. Let's go back a couple recent wide receivers this team has drafted that have not panned out. Okay. Martavis Bryant. Obviously, it wasn't so much a talent issue as a 5-cent head issue, right?
Yeah, it was a 420 issue, you could say.
Right,
on 420.
On 420 day here. But, it always makes you kind of look at me. People will say, well, with the new CBA and all like that, would Martavis Bryant be a guy that they go back after? That? I still, at this point now, no, I think the ship has already sailed there. But when you talk about, I think he's a little bit of an exception on the rule. But I mean, you have to look at the whole picture here too. The whole hearts and smarts and character issue there. And guys, not why didn't Marcus Wheaton make it? He had the college production, right? Why didn't Marcus Wheaton make it at the NFL level?
Yeah, I mean, I know there were some injuries associated with him. It was just the chemistry with Ben. I mean, it kind of felt like it was there sometimes, but also kind of not. I don't know. It just didn't click.
He had that Seattle game, and that was about it.
That was a big play. What do you have, like a 70-yard touchdown that game?
He had like 200-something yards in that game, didn't he?
Right. He's just a guy that had the talent, but yeah, there were some injuries that nagged him, and I think just his chemistry the fit wasn't right for whatever reason.
And he was kind of the original running wide receiver with a running back body, right? For the Steelers. Talking about Wheaton.
Yeah.
And then so I mean, obviously, look, and where I'm going with this is Swede. If you look at back to Linus Swede, he really didn't have the college production, right? Had lower college production. Martavis.
I think I like Sammy Coates, toolsy guy.
Sammy Coates was another one. Didn't have a lot of college production coming out.
Right.
Martavis Bryant did, other than his last season. What did he catch his final season at Clemson? 40 something. 40 something. I don't even think he hit the 50 mark if I remember correctly. And I guess what I'm getting at here is you try to go after the guys you've seen do a lot.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying. Less on the tools and the athletic profile, more towards just the production. And that's why I think that a guy like Donovan Peoples-Jones, who did not have good production, you can blame some of that on his quarterback play, but you can't blame all of that. He should have been one of the most dominant receivers in his conference. But that's why I sour on that a little bit more than maybe you would.
Well, that's why I say later rounds.
Yeah, but even later rounds, I think. I mean, I think it's less of a chance.
If you're going to get one late, I can see him being the guy. That's why I think he's on the list. And
how late are you thinking?
I'm talking that last 4th round pick or a 6th round pick. I don't think he's still on the board there in the 6th. There. So I think if they stand pat with their picks, the late 4th round pick would be probably where they would have to get him at.
Okay, that's fair.
And look, I don't have a long list of guys past 4th round guys that I could think that would be, this guy would be a guy that I could see them going after. Most of my guys are top 4 round guys.
Yeah, but later round guys, I would look at KJ Hill, Prochet, Callaway. I'm a big fan of the other Tennessee guy, Jawan Jennings. I know he ran 4.72. I think he's just going to make it in the NFL. Those are the names that I look at day 3.
Where'd you end up on Gandy Golden?
Well, the small school factor. I know he was at the Senior Bowl. When was the last time they drafted a small school receiver? The athletically, I don't know if he didn't test that great. I know, but I just about his athletic profile. I mean, his Senior Bowl was just okay. I don't have confidence it's going to happen.
I never saw it with him too, especially not as early as he's coming off the board. Maybe he's another one of those later 3rd, 4th round guys. I struggle seeing him as 100, top 100 guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have him out.
I could see Devin Duvernay being more of a top 100 guy than Gandy Golden.
Yep. One other name, Lynn Bowden from Kentucky, receiver, running back, slot option, interesting guy.
Man, if you ever wanted an Antoine Randall L. Hines Wardish type guy, right?
Yeah, absolutely. He threw 70 passes this year. Crazy stuff for the Wildcats. I'm sure they watched him last year when they were watching Benny Snell, like we talked about Logan Stenberg earlier. So not a running back. I would consider him a receiver. Antonio Gibson was a receiver. I consider a running back in the NFL, but potential slot option that'd be a lot of fun to play around with.
That just jogged my memory too. Going back to watching some Cam Akers tape this past week. You know how many attempts he had? They let him throw the ball a little bit there.
Really?
Yeah, he had, believe it or not, and I think a couple of these came in a series of like 2 or 3 games. But he had 6 passing attempts at Florida State last year.
Quarterback in high school or something?
4 for 6 for 50 yards. A little bit of trickery, but they also, I think there were 1 or 2 times they lined him up in the Wildcat and had him throw out a Wildcat there. Not that I'm looking forward to seeing such nonsense, at the NFL level. But that was one thing that stuck out to me when going back through his tape this past weekend.
He can throw 5-yard outs to James Washington in a Randy Fichtner offense. Yeah, he played quarterback. He threw for 2,300 yards and 20 touchdowns, I think, his senior year. So, former quarterback background there.
I think some of that's in the I can't remember if some of that's in the Clemson tape or not that I looked at. Some, when you start trying to speed rush through some of these guys to cram for the final exam here.
All right, let me look up his game log here for 2019. So when he threw
runs together.
No, not against Clemson. Threw 3 passes against Syracuse, 2 against the U, and an incompletion in the opener against Boise State.
Okay, the Syracuse was the one that I was watching.
Yeah,
then
different orange jersey.
Had multiple attempts in, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
There you go. So Cam Akers, he gets those some passes too.
All right. What do we miss on offense here? I mean, I think we've gone through it pretty.
I mean, quarterback, obviously, we're not seeing over the top. I know that Peter King's talking about Jordan Love. These guys just making stuff up, or they just throwing stuff in the air and seeing what sticks. Kevin Davidson, Princeton, maybe, but Kelly Bryant as a undrafted free agent, maybe, but that's about it.
I don't see it.
Yep, don't see it either. If they do, it's a mistake. Just for the record, if they do it.
All right.
That's everything I had. Dave, you want to get to some reader emails and close out the show?
All right, let's go to Eric Oberdorf here. Matt Canada's influence. Hey guys, thanks for all you do. Long-time listener, first-time emailer. One factor going into this draft that I haven't heard more than passing comments on are the additions to offense brought in by Matt Canada. I foresee a pick or 2 that end up through the season being identified as players that are used in his scheme. I think that Terrell Austin had some influence. Blah blah blah. You've discussed the addition of pre-snap motion. Why do people say you guys don't ever talk about it, but then they come up and they say you discuss the addition of some of the things. I just never understood the phrasing of that and all. We talked about that. This gets kind of lengthy here. My question is to you, who do you see in this draft that could be a rich man's Quadre Henderson? Quadre had 60 rushing attempts under Matt Canada at Pitt for 631 yards. 3 receivers combined for 55 rushing attempts for LSU in 2017. Don't forget that Canada coach Edwards Hilaire at LSU as well. He goes, I've been trying to find a spot to draft Memphis Antonio Gibson, but it looks like Lynn Bowden made a visit to Pitt during Canada's year there. He also a local kid from Youngstown. Anyway, I guess this kind of goes all the way around the question about Matt Canada and influence and guys they could potentially draft.
Yeah, in terms of the gadgety-ish, versatile kind of guys, Antonio Gibson's a guy I've talked about for a while now. Lynn Bowden from Kentucky's another one. Joe Reed, who I mentioned earlier, from Virginia. Tomlin, Virginia guys. That's always a good connection. He was a great in the kick return game, very prolific kick returner as well. So, top of my head, yeah, those guys make a lot of sense.
Yep.
Okay.
Let's see. Derek Smith. Hey guys, 2 short draft question. Limited draft picks, of course, but is there a position you can envision the Steelers doubling up on? Also, is there a players not necessarily in a position of need that if they fell would be too good to pass up? Example of one of the offensive tackles like Austin Jackson or Ezra Cleveland. I think we a lot of this we hit on the kind of the Cleveland example, at tackle. The further I've gotten along with this process, the more I've thought, okay, I won't be so shocked if they draft a tackle at any point, especially early there. As far as doubling up on a position, I don't know if you consider offensive line doubling up, offensive line in general. I could kind of maybe see that.
That's where I was going to go. Offensive line, or if you kind of counted, like, hypothetically, they take Tanner Muse and the safety, and it's kind of both, but kind of not. But I would say offensive line. I doubt it's going to happen if they only have 6 picks. I mean, just don't have the draft capital to have that luxury, but I would go O-line if you made me choose.
Yeah, and I would go along with the lines with the set. It depends on what do you want to even call guys like Tanner Muse or Hudson.
Right. Hybrid-ish, but really hybrid in the way that Mark Barron. Everyone thinks Mark Barron was a hybrid. He was just an inside linebacker. He just all he was in Pittsburgh was inside linebacker. He wasn't a hybrid guy.
I mean, because if you called like guys like Muse or whatnot as an inside linebacker, you could potentially see him go like a Muse, Evan Weaver, or something along those lines. So because they did lose a couple inside linebackers this offseason, right?
Mm-hmm. Pittsburgh would have the best coverage unit in football. They couldn't cover. They couldn't go backwards, but they could go forward with Weaver and Muse.
Well, I mean, Muse, at least he's got some athleticism to him,
right.
A higher level.
Stiff.
A guy that you're not going to, because of that guy not going to play at safety, I don't think. But yeah, I think offensive line and linebacker / safety, hybrid players, if you will, on defensive side of the ball there. And as far as
I was thinking. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I was thinking more of like a Tanner Muse / Brandon Jones, Kayvon Wallace combination instead of like Muse and Weaver.
All right. Chuck writes in, signed up for the ad free finally. It does work with Twitter on an iPhone if you're logged in. Completely worth it. Great value for the money. Thanks, Chuck. If Grant Delpit fell to 49, would the Steelers be interested in taking him? I think they probably would. How would he get on the field in 2020? How would he pair with Minkah long term?
How would he get on the field right away? It'd be a tough path to start, but I recognize with safety depth, I mean, one injury away from playing 1,000 snaps. And then that would be the concern there. The question with Delpit is just, the tackling. The Steelers don't like to draft guys that can't tackle that well. And Delpit, for the athleticism and the playmaking, the ball skills, the dude isn't physical enough, and it does not feel like a Steeler to me.
Really?
I mean, in that sense of the physicality and tackling and stick your face in the fan and get guys to the ground, that's his weakest point. And that is what the Steelers, I think, require. Minkah, great tackler. Edmonds, drafted for the physicality. The tackling hasn't quite been there, but certainly more willing, I would say, than a guy like Delpit. So that would be the struggle I deal with. If they draft him, I wouldn't be shocked by it. There's a big upside there. Not a lot of guys you can kind of find in that free safety, rangy type of dude. But it'll be interesting. Delpit's one of those guys where, how far is his fall going to be? Are we... a lot of draft guys are saying he's going to fall the first round, but is that just a smoke screen this time of year? Potentially. So I think Grant Delpits are going to be an interesting story in this draft class.
Okay, let's see. How far do you think he falls?
I don't know. I mean, let me see what I have here in my my full mock draft here. I have him going, and I'll spoil it here, 39 to Miami. So I do have a bit of a drop here, but not to Pittsburgh.
Okay.
But,
I find a hard time seeing him drop down to 49, but I mean,
yeah, I do too.
It's possible, I guess. Jay Smith writes in, this is Smitty. I really enjoyed the show, fellas. Do you guys really think if the season started today, McCullers would be the starter at nose tackle? I feel it would be a Lulu. I'm pretty certain he logged quite a few snaps there last season, and with the team bringing in Wormley, in my opinion, it opens up the door for a Lulu to start inside. I just can't see a scenario Dan is starting outside of an injury. What are your thoughts? I think McCullers is still the leader in the clubhouse until told otherwise, until the draft happens. I cannot see a Lulu taking up, the majority of those snaps.
Yeah, he's not a nose tackle. Just hasn't played it before. He didn't play it last year. He might have done some backer stuff at 3-tech, but not as your base nose tackle. And so, the season started today. It'd probably be McCullers, but I hope after this time next week, hopefully we're saying it's somebody else, or at least somebody else in the mix.
You charted it.
Yeah, I'm not going to pull up all the charting right now. I just know offhand Tyson Lewis did not play as a base nose tackle last year.
Yeah, he must have been seeing something different. Let's see, what else do we have here? Alan von Rosenberg. The Gilbrandt commentary analysis has been very interesting. Let's see. It doesn't tell us who will actually be good, but it's certainly clearly a strong indicator of what NFL teams think about the players. It would be very interesting to see how the Steelers have done with their picks compared to Brandt's draft ranking. Oh yeah, this is the one that I referenced earlier.
Yeah.
For instance, the Steelers took T.J. Watt around 30, and Brandt had him ranked 60. I'd say that was a clear win for the Steelers. Well, I mean, I guess it's a win compared to Brandt's list. He goes on to say Cam Sutton nearly on the number from where Brandt had him ranked, so probably a clear so far probably a clear loss for both. I'll dive in and do the comparison myself, but I can't find all of Brandt's priors list. Look, it's worth highlighting kind of what Brandt does at this time of year, because it is this time of year, because I put a lot of stock in his top 150 when trying to put kind of my final mocks together. But outside of that, can we use it as a tool to say, well, because Brandt had the guy ranked here, the Steelers are going to pick a guy ranked 20 after it? No. Yeah,
I mean, there's value in it. I don't want to overstate it, though, when it comes to Pittsburgh.
Right. Let's see here. Trying to find a good one here to kind of close things out. Sick bubblegum. Since we have some more time on our hands during these odds times, I thought I would take a moment to write to you guys and express my deep love for the terrible podcast. All right. Thank you for that. That's just a comment. System versus talent. From Thomas writes in, long time plus 10-year listener of you guys. I watched A Football Life on Carson Palmer. It led me to think about how important a team is to creating a talent as a talent is for bettering a team. Let me read that again. About how important a team is to creating a talent as a talent is for bettering a team. Does talent properly managed make most of a difference to a draft pick success?
Yeah, I think obviously you gotta have the right scheme, the right coaching staff. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's hard to quantify exactly. Can somebody that's a really talented player in an unideal scheme or coaching staff succeed? Sure, I'm sure you can find cases of both, where somebody that didn't have the greatest talent, was great in a particular system or scheme, and it worked out well. But yeah, I think obviously, you want the foundation to have a really good scheme, and where coaches are tailoring things to the player's strengths and weaknesses, not the other way around. That's probably the best way to have success in this league.
I think it starts with having a talented player first and foremost. Can coaching make somewhat of a difference with players? Yeah, I think it can. Obviously, you would want the players' top skill sets to be able to mesh with what you are asking him to do, and scheme. So is that kind of a loaded, what do you make?
It's a philosophical question.
Right. And how would you boil it down to a shorter question then?
Well, his thing is system or talent. Is it better to have a really good scheme with good coaches that make those players fit within the scheme with less talent, or just a really talented team that might not have the best scheme suited to their needs?
All right, this one from, let's see. I love the podcast and find a group of Steelers Depot to be the best source for any information regarding the Steelers, hands down. Thank you for that. So my question is, assuming several players each round fell to the Steelers, who would be players that you would be elated to see they're still be on the board for each round, but still realistically?
I mean, I can't do each round.
Yeah, like many years, this does happen for me when Colbert takes someone that has me pulling out what little hair I have left, like the Edmonds or Burns picks. I don't know. Is he talking about guys that overdrafting or what?
I think he's saying guys that would fall to who would like fall to 49. You'd be really excited about, like, okay, let's go get this guy that you didn't expect.
Oh wow. Jefferson?
Yeah, I mean, a Jefferson or a Mims would be fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, is it going to be a big surprise that Mims is on the board there at 49 overall, do you think?
Would be to me, personally.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of, we could spend 30 minutes going over that question, I think, different angles there. Matt writes in, draft question on some mid-range wide receivers. Appreciated the time spent on some of the upper-range wide receivers that could be available for the Steelers, but I was wondering what your thoughts are on some mid-range wide receivers like Colin Johnson and Devin Duvernay from Texas and Wisconsin's Quintez Cephas. I don't want no part of Cephas. Nothing really sticks out to me overall on that day. Matt, I don't know if you listen to the podcast regularly, but we've talked about Devin Duvernay a ton. What about Colin Johnson, Alex?
Tall, lanky. I see like a worse Alan Lazard. Not too interested in him. The receiver class overall, when will that run start in the first round, and how long is it going to last? That's really going to shape this receiver class. I think it's a big question in round one. How many receivers go, and when does that run start?
Do you think by the time the Steelers pick 8 or 9 off the board?
Let me see what I have in my mock.
That's quite a long run of receivers for that many to go in the first 49. I know it's happened before, I think.
In my mock, I had 7 going before 49, and I think it could be even 8 or 9. So I might have even undersold that a little bit.
Taylor writes in, I've been watching film on just about every player. I feel the Steelers may have a chance to draft at 49. Hard time seeing a better fit than Neville Gallimore. I agree partially with Alex's assessment of Gallimore, except based on what I've seen on tape, I believe he is further along in his development than what Hargrave was coming out of South Carolina State. I feel as far as the legitimate draft options for the Steelers, there isn't another player that may be available to them at 49 that will have a bigger impact on the 2020 season than what Gallimore can have. Tight end, wide receiver, running back, linebacker, offensive line, and God forbid quarterback would all have limited impacts on the current roster for 2020 season. Convince me that Gallimore is not the top player on the Steelers board by the time the pick 49 comes around. Should he still be there? Taylor, we talked, Alex was high on Gallimore coming out of the Senior Bowl, right, Alex? We've talked quite a bit about, Gallimore potentially, and he's like number 41 on Gil Brandt's list, I think, which we started in that list of players that we have floating around, and 19 players that we spent a lot of time on. I think Gallimore was the top of that list, and we said, look, this could be the list of guys.
Yeah, it certainly could be, for all the reasons we've talked about, but I just feel like at 49 they are more likely to go on offense than defense, right or wrong. That kind of feels the direction that they're leaning right now, and so I would not be mad about Gallimore one bit, but I just feel like they're going to go offense at 49.
Right, and here's the thing, we forgot to cover this. Not that the odds matter, but the betting odds right now have the Steelers going offense slightly more favored than the defensive side of football. And read what you will into Ben's comments, which really I don't know how much stock you put into that and all, but I think it's a lot and past history with how many times. Heck, you got to go all the way back to David DeCastro was the last time they took an offensive player with their first pick in a draft. There, it really does feel like offense is going to be the pick.
Yep, and really, realistically, from that receiver, running back, or interior offensive line, I guess.
Yeah, and running back, we can't totally discount the running back, obviously, but I think it's going to be wide receiver, offensive line. Obviously, I don't think it's going to be quarterback or wide receiver, so that only leaves really running back to add to that. But I would rank it wide receiver, offensive line, running back.
Okay, fair enough.
In that order. Would you put it in the same order?
I still have to think about it a little bit more. I would separate interior offensive line with tackle, and I have interior offensive line as higher just because I think the talent might be a little bit better. From, like I said, I think 6-7 tackles are gone by the time 49 rolls around. But that's basically why I kind of had it as like a 33% chance for running back, because if you want to divvy it up that way, I know it's not, you don't have to do it this way, but receiver, running back, offensive line, give them a third chance for each, and you got pretty good odds there.
All right, been way all over the place today. So with that, why don't we cut it there? We'll be back on Wednesday and get after a little bit more. By then, I think I'll have my mock draft up by then for sure. So we'll discuss that. Alex, your full 7-round mock draft's coming out when?
Thursday. My Steelers mock draft on Wednesday, so I don't know if you want to maybe post yours tomorrow or Thursday or whatever, right. But mine will go up Wednesday.
All right, I'll try to get hard to work on mine and get it up for Tuesday sometime there. So in the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex on Twitter at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate to the cause, go to SteelersDepot.com. Hit the donate button up right navigational bar. And if you like an ad-free version of the site, go to SteelersDepot.com. Hit the ad-free version upright navigational bar for $25 for one calendar year. You can have an ad-free version of the site. Thank you for listening to the show. Thank you for visiting the site. A lot of good content coming for you between now and by the time the weekend ends, it is officially draft week now. So with that, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.